minute. Sorry.
Sorry,
Sorry, Todd.
Sorry, I'm
No,
sorry.
you're fine.
It's a formality.
Here's the new picture. Yeah, because they were not liking the above the top of the building thing. So I talked with the building owner. This one here we're still flexible on. We're talking about getting into the alley. I just need a picture for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hold on, I've got one more party record I gotta grab, so I'll be right back.
Okay.
Donna wasn't here last time, no? And of course Eric wasn't either.
So what is this application?
That was rejected a long time ago. So we have nothing on it. I waited, no.
Oh.
I waited to crack my head on that.
Okay.
It doesn't exist.
Okay.
All lines.
Okay, so that's,
Those first two were from last time.
You're on line for the flower, you know that.
yeah.
I turned it down.
Finally got her lead road, she let me. I was waiting on Donna.
Yes, she said she had another party of record that she had to get these guys. It must have been a mail or something. We're also waiting for Eric to call.
Eric Bolt. Well, I think that one, Eric, just get overloaded.
Wait, you didn't say this.
Are we ready?
Well, can I make just a quick announcement?
Yeah.
So we haven't opened the meeting,
No.
you wanna do it before the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those individuals seated in the rear of the council chambers will be the first called upon to fill vacancies on multiple commissions. Let's see, Carolyn, Michael.
Do you want temporary?
Just move up, be a part of the group.
We're here.
Okay, oh, you do? Now, do this.
Well, if I may intercede, we are enjoying our entertainment, but,
Yeah.
we are here for an historic landmark commission meeting, and I'm gonna call that meeting to order at this point and ask our secretary for a roll call.
Sandra Bissett,
Here.
Bob McNary,
Here,
Eric Gleason is absent, Doug Leash,
President,
Tim McLaughlin,
I'm here with bells on.
and Donna Lawrence is absent.
Did Eric call?
I have not heard from him.
Okay. So our chair had actually called and said that he would like to at least listen in. Bob, you will have to preside the meeting, but, if we do get Eric on the phone, we'll put him on the speaker so he can partake and watch it as well as give comments if he has any.
Okay, I declare that we have a quorum, so consequently, we are going to have an official meeting. And if Sandy would help me, we will start with the pledge to the flag.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sandy. Mine's here. Set aside. Now, I'm going to clarify which agenda that we are using today. I have an agenda here in front of me that I think is incorrect. It says that we only have, well, I don't use this one then. I'm just trying to get rid of the one that's no good.
So, because the one that was no good was mailed out before we knew that the meetings or the two hearings would be continued, we do need to have you adjust the amended or approve the amended agenda as presented.
Which is
Right,
really good.
that's what I'm looking for. So I'm looking at the agenda that has got item A, B, C, and D is public hearings. If we're all on that same agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I move that we approve the agenda as, the amended agenda as written.
I second the motion.
If there's no further discussion to call for a vote, I say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The agenda has been approved. Now we're up to public comment, and I'm overjoyed to see this many people in the, audience there. Tim, this would be the time you recruit, find your, volunteers. This is the time that we have open for public comment. You cannot comment on things that are on the agenda, but any other thing that pertains to historic things, this is the time for you to have a moment to tell us about what you're thinking. So I'm asking come forward, give your name and address, and speak at will. Hearing no one, I'm gonna close that part of the public hearing, of our landmark meeting, and we will go now to our public hearings. And I'm going to, I got new copies here, hold on, I can't wait to find it.
Chairman,
Yeah, it's here, don't worry, there it is.
we had a question now.
What?
Oh.
Pardon me.
Okay, Eric, I guess Eric wants us to call him, do you have access to
Oh, is he a part of our 5 minutes? Come on.
No, actually, Eric, it sounds like Eric, we're trying to get Eric
I
to
don't
come
have his
through.
number.
I got it right here. You just have to use it.
Can you just read it out to me?
503-505-4121.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Bob, you can go ahead and proceed, and Paula will try to get Eric on the phone.
Hello.
Hi Eric, it's Paula.
Hi, Paula.
We started the meeting, so just jump on in there.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Bob, you can proceed. Please.
Well, fine, no. I'll get my papers in order then for the few minutes. I guess that Eric, you're there, but you're not gonna get to read the operation for a public hearing, so I'll take your place, Eric. This is the
Okay.
time for a public hearing for the Landmark Commission application 168-19, the Dells Main Street, and this is continued from July the 24th, 2019 meeting. How much of this Can we rely on none?
Gotta read it out loud. I'm
It's
sorry.
a new meeting, okay.
Yep, so, yeah, well, we have new people in the audience, so you do have to read it all, sorry.
Alright, now back to repeating myself. Now's the time specified for the Historic Landmark Commission to conduct a public hearing. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider the following application 168-19, the Dells Main Street, whatever, I'll let my voice fall right there. It really regards installation of neon signs. The substantial criteria upon which the Historic Landmark Commission will base its decision in this manner are contained in the City Comprehensive Plan and the Land Use Development Ordinances. A public hearing is required by law and certain rules apply. First and foremost, you must be recognized by the chair in order to speak and present testimony. When recognized by the chair, please proceed to the microphone and state your name and mailing address for the record. The hearing is required by law to be tape recorded. Generally, the public hearing procedure is as follows. Prior to the public hearing, a determination will be made on the qualifications of the committee members and allow for challenges from the audience. I will open the public hearing with a staff report. The purpose of the staff report at this point is to further identify the applicable criteria of the case being considered and provide background information about the case. After the staff report, we will hear testimony from the proponents, those persons in favor of the application. Next, there will be testimony from the opponents, those not in favor. Next, there will be testimony from anyone who wishes to offer testimony or ask questions. Then, in the honor of the right to rebuttal, we will again hear from those in favor of the application. To expedite the hearing, the commission members may ask questions of the persons as they testify. When this process has been concluded, we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. During the hearing, some important standards apply. First and of all, those who testify must hold their testimony to the decision criteria. As in law, all land use hearings, there are complete rules, a set of rules, procedures, and criteria we must follow. Second, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statement or evidence sufficient to afford the commission members and the parties an opportunity to respond to these issues preclude an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Third, the failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with detailed specifics enough to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for the damages in circuit court. Fourth, prior to the conclusion of the public hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. If such a request is made, the law states that the commission shall grant the request by either continuing the hearing to a time and date at least 7 days from the date of the initial hearing, or the record be kept open for that period at least 7 days. Those are the rules. Is there any questions? Hearing none, I will go to the next page. Ask the members of the commission if they have any
Ex parte.
contacts, conflicts of interest, or bias which would not allow them to render an impartial decision in this manner. Have any of you members any?
I don't have any, I don't think.
I have none.
Hearing none, we will go on. Does anyone in the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of any of these commission members? Hearing none, we will go beyond that. The public hearing is now open. Following the staff report, are any commissioners' questions of staff Ask for testimony of any persons in favor of the proposed application. And when the request for person to come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Okay, so I think we're ready for the staff report. So, I did present the staff report at the 24th meeting. If you would like me to go over any points, we can do that. My understanding is you probably want to get a little additional information from the applicants. So, unless you have more questions for me and staff, we can go ahead and get proponent and or opponent comments or additional information.
Are we ready for a staff report?
So, okay.
You're not going to give us one.
I already did one unless you want me to do it again. So I did not add or modify or change it from the last time, so it's exactly the same staff report.
Do you have any questions, Doug, that you want to ask staff since?
No, I had just suggested that because there was some controversy and if you had any suggestions that might help one way or the other,
Okay.
but apparently you didn't come up with anything, so.
Well, okay, so I guess I failed to get that out to you. I did have some conversations with the applicant, specifically Don, as well as, the entire Main Street board, via email, pretty much. My suggestions, or at least my conversations or my email to them, called out some of the concerns and maybe gave us some, I wouldn't say advice, but maybe some suggestions in terms of what you will need in addition to what was provided already. So I did request that they bring some additional information regarding the grant, what it was written for, what it meant, and basically what the scope was for that grant. I also asked them to provide some information, some background information. Bob had called and asked some background information on specific signs, basically where did it come from, just a little bit more information, which it looks like Mr. Bento is here and he can probably answer every one of those questions. And then the other one I mentioned is, the concern, or at least some of the concerns that I heard from each one of you regarding it being on the top of the building and being a roof sign or being a roof installation. And that, taking a look at the potential or the opportunity to bring it down and be a flush mount type sign on the building. And then along with that, I know there were concerns regarding lighting. I suggested that they talk to building owners and see if they had any issues with them having some sort of timer so that it would be on for a certain period of time and not to illuminate the skies and or at a late hour if there are any residential or other uses that it may harm. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I think, what I emailed to their group. I think that it looks like they've prepared some modifications to some of their applications, and I guess we can go ahead and let them provide that information to you if you like.
Are we working under the same, application now? I've seen another picture float by here a minute ago.
Yes.
Has there been a change in the application?
So they have not, so what was handed out that I pulled back quickly, the applicant does have some additional drawings or some photos. I can let them go ahead and you can call them up, they can detail what they're looking at doing, or maybe a modification to the application that may be a little bit more favorable to you.
Well, that is, now we're ready to call for the proponent to
Proponents, correct.
speak to us.
All right.
So, Don?
I'll go ahead and go first and then.
Oh, you're gonna send up the new, there.
Oh, sure.
So I'm gonna go ahead and pass out what Don brought. I'm gonna go ahead and keep it separate. So I'm gonna do the first two signs for, the Last Stop Saloon.
I'm gonna hold this so my head doesn't bob around while I'm talking and everybody else can hear.
I need your name and address for the record.
I'm
Is
so
that-
loud that you're not
is it
coming
on?
through very well.
I hope so.
It doesn't sound like it.
So, thanks, Mel.
You can adjust the mic stand if you'd like to. You can raise it.
Okay, so I am Don Warren. I live at 214 East 5th in beautiful Dallas, Oregon. I'm also the Main Street program president. And I have a bit of information for you as regards the pieces that Don was talking about. So the first one I'd like to address is the scope of the grant. So about a year and a half, year and 3/4 ago, we got a grant for $25,000 to refurbish, repair, and restore 5 signs so that they could be eventually placed throughout the city. Presently about 82% of that money, almost $20,000 has been spent in restoring those signs. And the last payment to the Neon Sign Museum is outstanding until they're completed. And we have a holdback of about $2,000 for engineering permits, and hopefully have a little bit left over to get the things mounted up. So that's the scope of the grant. And David will give you the information on the sign history. And then as far as the pictures go, I got 3 new ideas put together for the placement of the dogs and suds on the last stop, flush mounted instead of up on the top of the wall. And talking with the building owner, Todd Carpenter, he said the Don's Donut, in a way to get it out of the skyline, would be to get it on top of the rec building, which has a high arcing roof beam. It would keep it below the top of the building if we mounted it on the back of the rec building. And then the one for, well, we're not talking about the same ones yet.
Just this one, yes.
That's just those 2. State in order, Don. And let's see, what else can I tell you? The project's well underway, money's spent, and it'd be a horrible thing to walk away from it. More information can be provided to you by the building owners and David, unless you have any particular questions for me.
So I do wanna go ahead and point out, this is another option. However, the Don's Donuts is actually on a different building. So we can't really make a decision on any other building or a placement on another building without doing a re-notification. So that re-notification is required by state law, that we notify property owners and give them the time to comment. So if Main Street, this is an option, it looks like, if this is the direction they wanna go, then we would just end up withdrawing the Don's Donut from the Last Stop Saloon.
Don, would moving the other one down, be the same situation? That, because it's in a different place, would they have to reapply?
They would not. So as long as it's on the same building, correct, and as long as it's the same property, we're fine.
So, I'm a little bit lost, but that's not unusual. Where are we as far as, deciding the location? Are we discussing the location at this point?
So you are only discussing the sign installation on the Last Stop. So whether that be Don's Donuts and Suds and Dogs, or if it just be the revised photo that was provided and only be the Dogs, Suds and Dog.
Dog and Suds.
Dog and Suds, sorry.
Now, both of these buildings, if I may ask this question, and I already know the answer, but I'd like to see it on record, are historic historic designated buildings.
So correct. So again, if they do choose to move it to the recreation building, we cannot talk about that today. So yeah, there you go. So if that is something that they're choosing to relocate it to a different building, we'll go ahead and have to make another application, and we'll get another public hearing for that new location.
So what we're basically doing then is deleting a sign today. I'm asking you, I guess, deleting a sign today and changing the location of one.
So I think that's a decision that you get to make. We provided you the pictures of where we originally intended to place them that we talked about last week. And these pictures here are ideas that the building owners have provided us to see. Because I think the way this works is you get to approve it as written, deny it as written, or advise us to make modifications per your sensibilities. So these are just provided as ideas. I'll let the building owners talk to what their preferences are. As far as Main Street is concerned, we're just trying to enable beautification and thriving businesses. So it's the business building owner's choice about where to place them, so I can't answer that question for you.
So Bob, it's kind of like option 1 and option 2 is what they've put before you, so this is another alternative.
Well, my question at this point, why are you bringing this to the Historic Landmarks Commission? What historic feature does this sign have to the Dells?
So the signs do have historic provenance, and I'll have David Bento talk to that portion of it. As suggested by Don in our communications over the past week, that would be something that would be information that would be helpful for you to find out. As far as what gets brought into the city that's historic, that isn't historic to the Dalles, I think those are still important things, particularly if they drive visitors, get business people to see more foot traffic around the streets so that our downtown center is a bit more thriving. And that's the goal of the Main Street program.
I have been busy this last week studying our ordinance, and I can find no reference in our ordinance that we will preserve, restore, or anything historic from another community. It always refers to something that is the Dells property. And
Correct, Bob, so let me go ahead and interrupt, sorry. What you are approving is anything that, or any modification to a historic building. So you are stewards of our 2 national historic districts as well as a number of other historic properties. Your job is to ensure that any application or any modification to those historic buildings, whether it be a sign install, an art installation, a facade improvement, that it meets guidelines and that it does not destroy the integrity of the building. So the reason that it's coming before the Historic Landmark Commission is to ensure that the application that they're making does not destroy the building, does not meet all of the criteria that we have. That's why, it's because it's going on one of our historic inventories. That's why you're reviewing it.
And now maybe I'm off on, but it also mentions that we should not be moving objects from one district to another.
Right, so that this, yes.
I have asked about where these signs originated, and the history of them, and I cannot hear any answers on it, and I wouldn't know where to start finding the answers myself.
So let's go ahead and have Mr. Bento, the building
Excellent
owner,
idea.
or excuse me, the sign owner actually give some information regarding those signs. So David, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is David Bento. I'm from the Neon Sign Museum, and my home address is 6301 Northeast 124th Street, Vancouver, Washington 98686.
History of the signs.
Okay, so the signs,
So Don's Donuts and Suds and Dog.
Dog and Suds.
Dog and Suds.
Dog and Suds, Dog and Suds,
Sorry.
just those two.
Just those two
Okay.
right now.
In the mic, please.
So really,
In the mic,
I'm sorry.
please. Thank you.
All of the signs, of the 5 signs we have talked about, I talk so loud. All 5 signs really represent kind of, I think, a piece of America. So they really stretch from California to really the Midwest. So Don Donuts specifically is from Michigan. There was a chain of, I think, around 58 of them. They were eventually purchased by Dunkin' Donuts, but it was a classic Midwest franchise. And then Dog and Suds was, I think, specifically founded in Illinois. I was going to say Chicago, but founded in Illinois. There are still a couple of Dog and Suds in business. They were one of the very early drive-up diner, roller skating, kind of think Happy Days, kind of that great era of America. So, and again, I've always viewed this as an art installation. One of the things I always said, and I think sometimes people haven't always agreed with my view of it, was that these signs wouldn't be on the fronts of buildings, but that they would oftentimes either be on the back of the building or almost somewhere where, I always said that when you're driving up to 3rd, we're on 3rd Street, there's certain buildings that there's a wall that faces that way. And the whole idea, if you put it on that wall, it would force somebody to park their car, get out of their car, which is the whole purpose of having a downtown merchants district, to get to view the signs. So, again, I don't wanna go down some rabbit hole here, but, that to me was not so much that we would ever put any of them necessarily on the fronts of the buildings, which would keep people from being confused if is there a flying ace, inside of this, the store, but, does that help you any? None of them are from the Dalles. Any other questions?
Well, we have been talking about a plaque being installed in somewhere in relation to these signs. And so this on the writing on the plaque would clearly designate that it didn't exist here. It would never pertain to a business that was here. Then it would pertain to wherever you might have found this sign or been brought this sign into us. I am at this point not enthused, but I'm listening.
Okay.
But why are we picking historic buildings when we have so many other buildings in this town that are non-historic, and so they would not even be included in our criteria? We would not have a voice in this operation if it wasn't for the fact that we're working with historic buildings.
I don't know that I'm specifically the person to reference that question to, but I don't know if somebody else would be. I would just say, for me personally, it's a project that I've wanted to do for a long time. I probably am not overly concerned about where they are. Safety is of importance to me. Visibility is of importance to me. As far as the buildings are concerned, I think perhaps it was Main Street, then they can speak to that. Is you work with people that you're comfortable working with that are probably more receptive to the idea of creating tourism and creating a draw off the freeway, and that would be, and again, I'm probably not the person to really answer why specific buildings have been located. It's either friends of Main Street, the friends of the museum, people that we know, so.
So David, I do have a question.
Yes.
So when we approved the Sears sign going on the Commodore last year, which that has since gone away.
Okay.
Jeremiah had provided us some details regarding the obscured location and making sure that they were obscured.
Yep.
So that it was just like you explained, and then providing a street level or eye level, narrative stating where it originally came from, and maybe seeing if it could tie to some, historic feature or district or location in the Dalles. Not necessarily a requirement. And so in terms of so being obscured, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, was these obscured locations didn't necessarily need to be seen from the freeway. Am I incorrect from that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So this, and I think that was some of the concerns was them being so far up in the air and being seen from the freeway, but that answered my question, so, sorry. Clarification.
I think the only last thing I would say, just when you bring up the Sears sign, and again, to me, I think I think as a student of the road, I've got more than 1.5 million miles of road trips across the United States collecting since I was 12 years old. And the Dalles to me still is the end of the Oregon Trail. And you think Lewis and Clark came here on their first road trip across the United States. And America, and you bring up the Sears sign that I have, I purchased specifically for the Dalles. And one of the very first stories that I heard 4 years ago when I got into that building is somebody stopped by and said that they were so excited that we were in there, and said that they'd grown up here, and that they said, when the aluminum factory shut down, we knew it was gonna be a big deal, and jobs were gonna go away and this is gonna happen. And he said, but when the Sears stores closed, he said, that was like the nail in the coffin. It was like, Sears is leaving. And I was at an auction, and this Sears sign came up. It's the oldest neon Sears sign that exists. It came from the Chicago location, and you think, it's sort of the end of an era. And I said to somebody, the Dalles is going through a renaissance. This is a whole, it's like almost fitting that one of the first signs you would put back up would be, Sears. And, it wasn't that long Sears came back. And I know it's a little corny, but to me, it just speaks to what I've seen in 4 years and how excited we are to be part of this community. We just purchased a house a couple weeks ago, so we're very excited to actually become part of this community. But I just think that this project sort of speaks to America, and I think no city on the West Coast could speak more to the expansion west than the Dalles. So, anyway, I'm sorry.
I would just ask you, if what we're working on now was approved, how many more are you thinking of expanding, or are you, or where do you sit with that?
Well, I don't wanna scare anybody.
No, I would think it would be a good thing if we went, you know. if it was
I would
approved.
love to keep putting signs on buildings, absolutely, and I have signs that are too large to put in our building, but they're not so large that it should scare people, but, you know, I have probably only a tenth of my collection in the museum right now. I'd like to put some signs in our parking lot as well, but, sure, absolutely, I mean, if you said, could I put 25 signs up on buildings in town? Yes.
Okay.
So, but the grant is for 5 or
Yes.
6? 5, just 5. So they do currently have a grant that they're trying to fulfill, is only 5. And then again, that, just to reiterate, it is a 5-year lease, so it goes on the building, for 5 years, and that's what they've promised. I'm not sure if that could be extended or.
It could, yes, absolutely. All right.
Sandy, you got a question?
No, I just have, would like to reiterate what I said in the last meeting, but I'm not sure that this is the time, that, I feel very strongly about things that aren't locally relevant, and, my other issues were mostly location, and, I just, we are a historic town, and I've read some of the Facebook, items that were given to us, and, you know, we're not on Route 66, you know, which would be, to me, a wonderful place for all of your signs. And a wonderful place is also the Elks Club, where you have them. But, I think they're kind of at cross purposes with the historic nature of this town, and so that's all.
Thank you. You've asked your question that you were interested in asking him. Thank you, sir.
Perfect.
Can I ask for anyone else that's opponent or in favor of this that wants to talk at this point?
Todd Carpenter, 216 East 5th Street, Niles, Oregon. I'm obviously in favor of this, as an attraction to downtown. I love the history of the town. You guys know I do. I love the history of the town. I think there's a place for this. I mean, I think it's an attraction. We would like this committee to, one of your questions was, why are we coming to you? I think everything between the church and the middle and 1st Street and 5th Street has to come to you, because they're all in the historic zone. So anything we do, is that not true?
Well, there are 2 historic districts, so there's a good portion of those properties,
Yeah.
yes, that would, yes.
So any building pretty much in that area that we come to try to do something to, a mural or place a piece of artwork or something, is gonna have to come to you no matter what, right? That's my understanding.
Correct.
So the mayor has this beautification plan. He wants to draw people downtown, build a business, get people walking downtown and everything. And I feel like these signs, in places that are obscure, as David Bento said, that are off the beaten path, and areas, quite frankly, that are yucky to look at. I mean, if you go down 1st Street, look at the backs of the buildings, it's not pretty back there. It needs some work. We need some murals. We need some attraction. So I'd just like to see, if I put my Main Street hat on, Main Street would like to get some buildings approved with some parameters for you guys that would work for you guys, where we could put the signs. As an owner, I just wanna see traffic downtown. So, and I think this would help. I think this would draw in visitors. It would sort of help beautify the city, so it kinda goes in with the murals, or with the city's plan, the mayor's plan. And so I think that I'm hoping you guys can see both sides, see the historical side. I mean, when we're not putting them on Second Street or Third Street, although there is a historical relevance to that, having neons on Second and Third Street in the 20s and 30s, they were there, but we're talking about obscure places to drive traffic and artwork, so. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
If you install signs on the back of the hotel, Banks Hotel, for your reference, would these signs be lit 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day? What is you're talking all the time referring to seeing them from the freeway, as though they're gonna get off at the next interchange and run back to see where this sign is. Will they be lit during the day, and will they be somewhat visible from the freeway in bright sunshine?
Yeah, so I think, any neon is visible pretty much all day long. But I personally, the reason I actually recommended the roof line, because I thought, I'm the same way, I didn't want them lit with customers if we do the bank, or if we do the hotel part when that happens. And I did talk to these guys this week about, can we put a timer on it and shut it off at a certain time of night, and we're totally, we want a win-win for the city. We want, again, to drive traffic, to help with walkability, to get excitement around downtown. I mean, the great thing is you got a National Neon Sign Museum and a proprietor that knows everything about neons and gets talked about in the LA Times, the Post, the Washington Post, all kinds of articles, travel magazines and everything. He's right here in the Dalles. And to sort of extend on that, what he's got going over there, and kind of extend that into the town, into some areas that are kind of run down, I think it would be beneficial for the Dalles. So your question was, will they be turned off? Yeah, I think that there would be a time when we can work with the city and say, when do we wanna, extinguish the lights at night, 10 o'clock, or, 11 o'clock, or whatever it is, and back on at 7 AM or something, I don't know. So we're, as a building owner, and as Main Street, I think we're, willing to work with somebody at the city on that.
I agree with you on one thing and I'm not picking at you, just be correct, that it isn't very attractive the way it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would attract anybody to jump off the freeway and come into the Dell and find a place to park the way it is.
Yeah.
But I just, don't know how to attack this at this point myself.
Understand, it's a tough decision.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Any further, questions of, come on forward, identify yourself, please.
I'm Gary Raines. I live in Parkdale, but I'm also one of the owners of the Craig office, what used to be the Craig office supply, the Craig building, which is at Federal 323. My home address is 4450 Baldwin Creek Drive.
Baldwin Creek?
Baldwin Creek Drive in Parkdale. But I'm also the owner of the Craig office building, which is at 2nd and Federal, 323 East 2nd. The most interesting thing about what Dave Benko's...
Can you speak into the mic, please?
What's the most interesting thing about what Dave Bento is trying to do, and what Main Street is trying to do, is do what the Dalles had in 1920. We have pictures in the 1920s of the Craig building, and all of 2nd Street was lit up with neon. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate that neon was not saved. It's unfortunate a number of the buildings were raised. It's unfortunate it has changed. This brings some of that back. Even though these are not, like for instance on the building that I'm talking about, my building, which is coming up in a few minutes, it is not a local sign. It is still a neon sign that is historically relevant. It's a neon sign that points to the Neon Sign Museum, which is one of the most important new additions to downtown the Dalles. This will create tremendous interest. It already has created tremendous interest. It accelerates that. I think there's just absolutely nothing bad about doing this, and everything good. And is it an art installation? What exactly it is? it's gonna be a walking tour of neon signs that adds interest to downtown, expands what's currently being done in downtown, and creates new interest in the Neon Sign Museum. It's a wonderful, wonderful addition to downtown. We look forward to you considering our building. So, thank you.
Oh, come on, Carolyn, please. I'm not looking out there, I'm looking for help from close.
Carolyn Wood, 1709 Liberty Way. Well, I wasn't intending to say anything, but you know, I was just thinking, we toured Wadena, Minnesota probably about 3 years ago, discovered some of our ancestors, didn't stay there, which I'm forever thankful, but it's a city, a small city about this size, out there in the middle of the plains, which has been declared, they have done the work to make their whole city a historic district. Every building has a little sign on it that gives its history of ownership back to about the 1870s, I think, is when it's on the railroad, which was a big draw for bringing the farmers to the plains. But they did this, I was quite surprised to see the number, they did murals, but this would go along with the same theme. And I asked, how come you've got all these pictures in the alleys? But it wasn't just alleys, it was sides of buildings. One was on more of a warehouse type building that could have been like a big grocery store or something like that. Anyway, I thought well, the comment was made, well, it was a way to clean up the alleys, to get more tours coming to look at them, and they are a long ways from any place. So, but anyway, I think, and I was sorry I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I was out of town. If you stick to the alleys, I think it has merit. I don't like the idea of putting it on the front of a building, especially unless it happened to be a sign that would represent what was in the building now. But I think it could certainly help to dress up the alleys. I would also suggest that we also have another goal in this part of the country, well actually worldwide, is cutting down nightlight. So that's why I think maybe not being on the top of the building is a good idea. I also think that being conscious of when they're on and off is also a very important feature. Midnight, or when people go to bed, we don't like flashing lights or lots of light when, and you'll be surprised what up the hill you can see downtown if you at the right angle through the trees. So, and it may not be desirable. So anyway, I think it shouldn't be totally discounted. I think there's a place for it.
Is there anyone else back there? I keep looking here, I should be watching you people. Come up and talk to us. Tell us what you are thinking. Well, we need your input. Yeah, please do. I knew I'd coax you a little bit.
You did coax me. I was just standing to listen in on the meeting, but I'm Chuck Gomes, Granada Theater. My mailing address is P.O. Box 1329, right here in Dallas. I'm sure you know the name, my name, I know. Chuck Gomes, the owner with my wife, Deborah, of the Granada Theater. And yes, we too are deeply entrenched into the history of the Dells. And I believe and I love and I live the history of the Dells. But let me just take a quick moment to clarify a mistake that David said. David talked about Lewis and Clark coming to the Dells, the Oregon Trail ending here. Really, folks, the reason Lewis and Clark came here is because they had tickets to the Granada that night. Okay, that's my little joke to break the ice. Folks, we talk about the back of the buildings, and I'm not here to address the artistic presentation of the neon.
I am personally not familiar with neon above roof lines. It's usually on the fronts of buildings or hanging over sidewalks to that extent, but who's to say there's a right or wrong to where you place your neon? I mean, let's think outside the box. But if we're considering the alleyways, there's two things I'd like to discuss, and that's visibility from the expressway, which I think is very important. I think it's very important that people driving down 84 see our town. I too have 1 million miles and have driven all over the United States, and I really have a fond visual affection for Chattanooga, because if you come into Chattanooga late in the evening, you round the bend in the mountains, and there's the river, and there's the lights of Chattanooga, and it is a beautiful city to drive into for the first time, or the last time, or hundreds of times. However, it's the same way with the Dells. When you're coming down 84 and it's evening and the lights are on in town, it is a magnificent city laid out before you as you drive into town. Well, when several of concerned citizens came to me for a mural on the side of the theater, I said, well, I would entertain a mural on the side of the theater if it had something to do with the theater, with the town, with the building. Don't get me wrong, but you know, I get it with salmon, and I'm okay with sturgeon, and I know they're out there, and there's the river, and yeah, and Lewis and Clark came here, and it was a trading town. Every mural just about says that. Now the later murals are starting to show some coloring outside the box, and to show a little creativity and a little difference to it. But when I said, instead of painting a mural on the side of my theater, would you consider painting it on the back wall, on the alley wall of the theater? And I believe this is very much addresses what we're talking about right now with mural. So here's the input I received from the committee, the mural committee, and it was, well, why would you want a mural on the back of the building? You drive down 2nd and 3rd Street and 1st Street, and that's where you see all the murals. And I said, and how many people go down 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street? And could you give me the numbers of how many people drive down 84 in a day? You know, there's 100,000 cars that go by 84. So I said, why don't we put a mural on the back of the theater? The back wall has never been painted. It's still in its original finish. We don't have to worry about previous paint jobs peeling off and taking our new mural with it. And the overwhelming opinion was, well, it's on the back of the building, Chuck. Who's gonna see that? Well, I disagree with that statement. I strongly disagree with that statement. I think back of the buildings are a great place for a lot of this artwork. And it's the forgotten side of the town, of any town for that matter, is the back of the building. So I believe that there are two consensuses here in town. One that says it's great to have art no matter where it is, and I'm in that group. And there's another group that feels that there's only one place for art, and that may be on the front of a building or in a park or something like that. And I disagree with that. The other comment was, if we put a mural on the back of the Granada Theater, people would not see it from the interstate, from 84. And I said, well, if you were willing to build a framework on the side of my building, because I was concerned about longevity, and is there an escrow account to maintain this mural, and what are we gonna do in 15 years or something like that? I said, if you're willing to build a framework for the side of the building, why don't we build a framework on the back of the building and elevate it another 20 feet or 30 feet in the air? I mean, let's really make it a visual statement. I offered the flat roof of the Granada Theater. I said, let's put a sign there. The Dells, the greatest little city in all America, the biggest little city in all America. Your gateway to entertainment, there could be lots of things. Who sees the roof of the building? All the people that fly into Dallas. All those people. And those are important people. They have places. So, that's my comments on placement and how some of the other members of the community look at it. But before I leave the lectern here in the podium, I have one more thing to address about neon. And I would just like to say to everybody in this room, well, you better reach down and pull up your socks and grab a hold of your hat and pull it down tight over your ears, because the Granada's neon has been restored, and it is going on for the Gatlin Brothers concert, which is bringing hundreds of people from out of town and will walk right underneath the Granada's neon marquee, and it is beautiful. I've had it on one night for a test. It's probably gonna go on tonight. And let me tell you about neon downtown. There is gonna be neon downtown. It is gonna fill 2nd Street. It is gonna be the most amazing visual presentation that the town has seen in many years. And I have to really thank Tim, who has worked tirelessly getting his people to help me and restore that marquee. And folks, we are in for a real treat, and I could not be happier. And thank you for the town for keeping history first and foremost in the Dells. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
So Bob, do you wanna see if Eric has any comments or anything?
Well, I was just gonna call on him before we close the public hearing, but, he can talk even after we close the public
That is
hearing.
correct.
Eric, are you there?
I am still here.
Can you hear him?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes, Eric, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe I'd wait till deliberations.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I can hear it happen now when I'm concentrating. Then if we have no further, we have one more. Come on, please do.
Right, Michael Leash, 2003 View Court, the Dalles. I think that, everybody's really mentioned the neon signs in regards to the value of the community. But as coming back to the Dalles, we've really struggled to find a theme, and there's always been this idea of, we have this theme, we need to find a theme and identity. And I think that, the neon signs is, as Todd and everybody's mentioned for the last, from the 20s all the way through the 60s, where neons decorated our 2nd and 3rd Street. And as we look at, successful themes like Leavenworth and other communities that have had beautiful use of themes, I think that we can integrate a usage of neon through a well-detailed guidelines through your agency and through your group that would help the Neon Sign Museum really exploit their ability to really put us on the map of this neon sign community, where we can bring back some stores may decide to actually bring back a neon sign for their billboard or for their signage for the front of their store, but we also may integrate these other signs as artwork and as this theme to really take advantage of the fact that we've got this asset here, which is the National Neon Sign Museum. And I think that the more that we bring in that theme along with continuing our murals and in keeping with our historic buildings, and I think if we integrate maybe those 3 themes into our historic vision and plan of our community, I think that we can really cement a very long-term identity for our community, and really finally put our anchor in the ground and really find an identity that really matches up with the museum, the murals, and these historic buildings, and really create something beautiful for our community. That's all I got.
Thank you. I see I think pretty well everybody's had a chance to talk, and I'm going to close the public hearing at this point. And there, Eric, I hit it. You want to speak first, Eric?
Sure, I can speak. I'm kind of sorry I missed the last meeting, but yeah, everybody kind of brings up good points, and I think one of the commission's concerns is the kind of the cumulative effect of the signs on the community. And that's something that definitely has to be considered. I mean, because 1 or 2 or 5 signs is one thing, but 25 signs is something that I think, as a historic district, we really want to be kind of on top of that and make sure that it kind of adds to the historic district rather than distracts from the historic district. And I think, you know, one of the National Register guidelines for the section for rehabilitation talks about not adding details that weren't part of the historic thing of the building, and these signs are that, but I think one of the things that kind of mitigates against that is that they'll be reversible, so it'll be one of those things that if the time comes, they can be reversed without doing damage to the building. And then the second thing would be that there'd be some kind of signage that kind of clearly states that they aren't part of the original building, but then tells the history of the sign and that. So I think those kind of 2 things help mitigate against that issue. So I guess I'm a little bit, I guess my thoughts are maybe 5's okay, but we should have a good plan if we're going to do more than 5, just to make sure that it doesn't become overwhelming.
Anyone have a question of Eric? I'm talking to commission members now. Okay, well, thank you, Eric. You've quieted us all down here, waiting for your words of wisdom. You got any further comments before a motion is made? Doug?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the audience for really good comments and insight into what's going on in the Dalles and what we might gain by having a project like this. I stated last week that I consider the signs to be like artwork, and I'm not concerned that they're local. They're like murals to me, and which are painted on the side of a building. I am concerned about placement. I talked with Todd this morning, and his building, we had the Doughboy up on top, and I was concerned about the visual aspect of that being up in the air the way it was, and we discussed moving it over to the recreation building. It's lower, it would be lower than the profile of the building that we originally had thought about putting it on, and I think that would work. And we were talking about moving the other sign, the doe suds went down on the side of the building. I think that if they're placed in spots that are visible from, not on the fronts of buildings, but from the side or the rear, I think they would be a good addition. Nice, and again, I see no problem with them not being local or from this area. To me, they're another draw for the public, like the murals are, and they're just a different form of artwork. As long as they didn't interfere with either the skyline or the looks of the building, I'm in favor of the project.
I concur with Doug. The main issue last week was the roof line, and the visual that we were presented with the change in position on the dogs and suds sign. I think that's great. I have no objection to that whatsoever, and I know we're only talking about that building, but the other visual that we had being a little bit lower, it seems to work also. And so, I think that's the main issue for me, as I said a little while ago, with placement. And, you know, and it has to be one sign at a time in terms of the placement and, you know, doing the project, utilizing the alleyways and also, having them visible from the freeway and not having a major impact on the front sides of our historic buildings. But like I say, one sign at a time. But I mentioned yesterday, or last week, well, it seemed like yesterday, anyway, that, you know, if there is a master plan in place, and especially if we're going to have potentially a lot of signs, that, there needs to be a plan. So that's basically all I have.
Can I ask staff to help you, and help Doug also? We are only talking about one sign at this point.
So that's up to you. So you could be talking about, which it sounds like the conversation that you're having.
Okay, I thought I understood you to say that it has to be a different application made for Don's Donuts.
Excuse me, yes. So today, your application is option 1 is what they submitted, which is here. And then option 2 would be just, we have to look at that one building. Option 2 would be this.
Okay.
So your decision will be basically on the last stop of the historic bank hotel. Not about the other location. If this is the direction you wanna go and not approve the Don Donuts on this building, then I will request that they come to me next week and make application for another proposed location.
So we get the right to put titles on these, I presume, so consequently, do we want to entertain a motion that we do not put both signs on our motion number 1, or how do we wanna do this so we keep it clear on paper what we are approving? I'm talking to the commission now, Doug.
Right, well, if we, agree with this change, then it would be a modification of the other,
But it is still on the same building though, so apparently that's not a problem.
And so we would approve the one sign in, an amended location. Tim, you got some?
Yes.
Tim?
Over the years, 45 to be exact, I've heard many people say, yeah, the Dalles, I've driven through there, I stopped for gas, but there's really no reason to stop. And so that tells me time and time again that we really need to do something to change the image, to change the attractiveness, to give a reason to stop in the Dalles other than get gas and move on to another location. We have a wonderful city, and as you mentioned, if you drive from the east going west, and if you round the corner coming by 84, and you take a look at Mount Hood, and look at the city and the dam, there is not a better visual anywhere than that visual coming into the Dalles. What I'm hearing is the need. I think that I'm going to recap what I've heard mentioned, is that it doesn't impact the fronts of buildings. It's limited in time and operation, so the scope of the signs being lit can be modified. It's focused on areas visible from the passing freeway, and its alleyways should be considered first, and that the signage is identified as not being from the area but historical in nature from other areas. And then what I see is this governing body, since it was a project that was submitted and funded as 5 signs, then the this body should be, setting the parameters, like the parameters I just read. And then allowing, the planning and building owners and the sign, everyone to coordinate together to find locations. And then you would come through for the final, recommendation from staff. And then if you had any concerns at that point, then you could question, much like what happened last week with the roof line that happened. And I must admit that I had to take a second look at that too, because I wasn't sure that would be the most attractive way to display that sign. So, in saying all of that, I think if you followed a progression that, you can accept the proposal, make the motion and approve it, but I think it should be done as a whole, not a piecemeal, but as a whole group, and then finally approve it for, after reviewing all the locations. That's my recommendation and my take. I forever hold my peace.
Have you got that all written down?
I think you showed us a lot of curves here, Tim, but we like it,
Oh.
we like it in the sense that we aren't really authorized at this point to discuss more than one sign at a time, am I right, staff?
Correct. One building at a time, they could request
Yeah,
multiple
pardon
signs,
me,
correct?
that's what I was afraid of, in the sense we can't throw a blanket out here and cover it all up at once. We've gotta take each one as an individual.
However, we can have parameters
Oh,
set.
yeah, we're getting that, I'm getting that point, but, we might set a parameter this time that we don't like on the next one. That's what we've got to, that's what you're saying in the long term. Is we might set a rule this time that looks good to us, but the next time we have our next resolution, it might not be the same.
Well, I think that we're not gonna set definite rules other than considering one sign at a time, where it's going, and whether we like that idea or not. I don't think that affects any other one. We're only talking about one at a time. And I would hope that we could say that we, like the dog spud one, or dog and spud, that we could vote on approving that area, and that, as Tim is saying, that maybe we need to do them one at a time, but then vote on all of them together at a future meeting. Is that kind of what you're suggesting, isn't it?
Yes. It seems logical that you don't wanna piecemeal it out, and you don't wanna be restrictive on time. What is the time on this? It's been a year in the rollout.
Correct. I think that they have, their deadline they're due soon,
So we are under some requirements to make a decision quickly.
Yeah.
I think we wanna move it as quickly as possible and make any modifications that are necessary to, reflect people's concerns. And then make a final approval and move forward. And I want to state for the public that I am in favor of this project, and I do appreciate, if you have not stepped into the National Neon Sign Museum, I was again there today, and it rivals many of the promotions in other parts of the country, Disneyland, for example. I mean, it is magnificent in our community to have that caliber. So I really recommend stopping by and taking a tour.
So, Dawn, how does, Tim's list factor into the staff report? I'm not even sure how to ask this, but I understand what he's saying, and I think that it would, speed up if we had, if every individual, application on, this topic, if it fit all of those criteria, not impacting the front of the building and all of the things that Tim said, if that was all covered, maybe at staff level before it came to us, I'm not sure.
So we could do a couple different things. So what we could do is you could ask staff to work with Main Street to come up with a proposed plan, like a master plan showing. Ideally, obviously, David Bento would be involved in that conversation, that taking a look and taking photographs, and that the Main Street organization actually work towards like mapping out what they want or what could be, or maybe option 1 or option 2 on a couple buildings in downtown. They could then come before you and just say, this is kind of what we're thinking, not have it actually be a formal land use application or a historic landmark application. So that we would actually get a good feel of, you could give your input on, you know, concerns about being placed in a certain area, or trying to spread it out, or trying to make sure that, you know, size-wise, that you're not going to have a build or a sign that's too large for a face. So we could do it a couple different ways. They could bring it to you, you could just, you know, have me work with them, kind of get a couple ideas. But I think we could bring like a master plan and maybe not identify a specific sign, but identify that, you know, David has a certain sign, or this building would handle a certain size of a sign, and then take a look at it that way, so we're not gonna be getting into any conflicts. And actually kind of review them just as a master plan or just a discussion item, rather than it being a formal application.
Well,
we can talk more about that in discussion after we're done with the public hearings too, if you want. But I'm not sure the direction you're definitely going. I have a feeling, but I do have some revised conditions of approval if you wanna hear what I'm thinking you guys are thinking. So if you guys are looking to, I need to quit saying that, the Historic Landmark Commission is looking to approve this application with the modified option 2 submittal with just the one dog and suds. My suggestion would be to revise condition of approval number 1 to basically read, work will be completed in substantial conformance to the revised option 2 picture and proposal as submitted and reviewed for the dog and suds sign. And then I would also look to add number 5, Dawn Donuts is excluded from this approval. And then number 6, installation of a small placard at eye level will be required for the neon sign. Details of the historic sign will include the vintage original location and short history of the sign. If you want me to do another one, let me know. I could work some other conditions of approval.
So can we vote on what you just said?
Yes, so someone can, yes, that's all right, someone can make a motion, for the recommended approval, or revised recommended conditions of approval, 1 through 6 as stated by Dawn, that's fine, and then I'll get these to Paula so they're accurate.
And also, I guess before, Eric had mentioned being concerned about being overwhelmed with too many signs. I don't see that as a problem at all, because you're gonna go through a process of adding them slowly, and once you got what you thought was the saturation point, you wouldn't put any more in. I don't see that as a problem at all.
Yeah.
But I do kinda like the idea of maybe having a master plan so that you guys can get a good feel. It might also help Mr. Bento, you know, look at his inventory and see what he has to offer and or allow it to be leased or put up in our community.
Well, a master plan would make it easier for Dave, because he could start thinking about more signs in different areas, and if you identified places, or he could suggest ones to you, you know.
Well, that was my concern at the last meeting, was that there didn't seem to be a master plan. And, or at least I wasn't aware of the master plan.
Well, I don't
Put
think
it
there
that
was
way.
one, you didn't miss it, it wasn't there, I don't think. Because I'm hearing contradicting reports, like we want them on the back wall, well, the next application we have here wouldn't work on the back wall, it has to be on the side wall. And I'm hearing also that they have to be in the alley, and so on and so forth. So we're kinda contradicting what we're gonna look at next, and by doing this one.
So I think that.
I don't think we wanna make stipulations like that. One, we know we don't want them in the front of a building, we want them basically either in the back or down the alley, but there's a lot of flexibility there. I don't see any conflict with what we're talking about myself.
So I think
You,
the,
Dawn?
no, I think the key word is obscured, and whether someone thinks that that's an alleyway or on the back corner or portion of a building, I think, you know, it's kind of to somebody else's, you know, my idea of obscured needs to be just put towards the back, not necessarily on the face of the rear of the building. So, I mean, I think that was what the grant's intent was, and like David Bento had explained, it's really to get people out of their cars, turning around and taking a look at some of these buildings and actually enjoying our downtown.
Well, Commissioner, are you ready to accept Don's?
Yes, I'd like to move that we accept, the proposal as Dawn, stated it, thank you.
The revised condition of approval number 1, and then adding conditions 5 and 6.
And I would second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Hearing no further discussion, I will ask you to raise your right hand or say aye.
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 Now that only takes care of one application.
That is one. We can go really fast on the other 2 though.
And I am a non-voting member of this commission, since I represent the city of the Dalles.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out.
I saw people looking at me, well, why is he not?
Okay, that takes care of
That
applications.
takes care of that one, yes.
Don?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
kids.
there we go, yes, so Todd has
Now,
to leave.
How many applications did we have under how many numbers? Is that 168-19?
That is 168-19. So we have not had any changes, you do not need to read the rules again. So if you wanna just go ahead and reopen the public
And-
hearing for number 169-19, we can do that.
And I have to ask if anyone here has conflict of interest on 169-19. This is the one for Sigmund Flowers. Is there any member that has conflict of interest?
No.
Hearing
No.
none, now we can go ahead and we have to open the public hearings, I suppose, for the applicant to testify in why we need to put up this sign.
True.
And I don't know who that will be, but
So let me just give you a little bit, I am going to pass around the photos that they did bring today. Again, this is similar to the Dawn Donuts, so, even though we all look at those 2 buildings and assume Sigmund's Flowers, they actually are 2 distinct buildings. One is the Old Oak Hotel, which is, what we know as Sigmund's, and then the back building that houses the mortgage and wine tasting is actually Optimo Cigar. So I'll pass you out the photos. So again, this is a different option or a different look. If this is the direction that we're going, we have to deny the application today because this is a different location. And we would not be able to review this proposal today. What could potentially happen is the sign. So as you can see here, the Sigmund's building is here and the Optimo Cigar building is here. We'd originally shown it going up on the face, or excuse me, on the roof line above the Optimo Cigar. So any relocation to another building would require a new application. And if they want to withdraw, we can definitely do that. There could be an option too where we could ask or entertain the question about bringing the flying service down, either being flush and or projecting, because it is pretty high up there, so you could potentially put it on the back side of the Optimo if that is something that they want to take a look at. So that might be a good question for the applicant, and the building owner is represented here today too.
So what is the proposal for the flat on the building in the alley, or we're just handed something entirely different here?
Right?
we're not in the alley at all.
Okay.
Well, last week, we talked about either moving it on the side and flush, or putting it parallel with the front of the building, sticking, I guess you'd say, into the alley.
Yeah, projecting.
The one problem a little bit is the telephone pole and the wires, as far as obstructing the visual quality of it a little bit, but if it was on that side, if you could point, yes, in that area, then that follows the guidelines that we've been talking about.
Yes.
I don't like it on Sigmund's building. It really belongs where we talked about it last week, I think.
Did you open the public hearing? We're good?
Oh, it is open.
I think so.
I think I opened the public hearing, and I was hoping that we had our
Okay,
staff report,
sorry.
and now we're ready for you.
I missed the official opening part. So the,
Sorry, we need you to state your
the
name.
printed,
and
oh
address.
yeah,
Sorry.
Don Moran, 214 East 5th in the Dalles. So I drew that up really quickly, my printer wasn't working and I didn't have a shot of the building in the right place and was confused. So that one you just got, that Don handed out for me is erroneous, bad job, Don. I can do better. So the one that, oh yeah, I'm Don, not Bowen.
Yeah, you have to identify yourself against it, but that's fine.
Yeah, Don of the Warrens. So, yeah, the placement here, either on, court or on the alley, either face is gonna work just fine to get people out of their cars, walking around. Yeah, I didn't have my Google Maps to quickly get another picture to throw it up in the right place. So, yeah, we can keep it in segments and keep looking at, the same proposal so we don't have to put it in again. Other than that, I don't have a lot more to say beyond what I said before. Grand, wonderful signs, wonderful.
Eric may need some clarification.
Okay, so Eric, are you understanding, so they did submit a picture, I don't know if you caught my narrative. They did submit a revised photo that showed the sign being relocated to the Sigmund's building instead of the Optimo Cigar building.
The Sigmund's building instead of which building?
Instead of the Optimo Cigar, which is the back building.
The one on the alley.
Yeah, it was a pictographic
Oh.
error. I made a mistake.
So the applicant is stating that they do wanna keep it actually on the Optimo Cigar and be, either on the, side of the Optimo Cigar, which would be towards the alley, either be projecting or, does it need to be projecting or flush? It can't be, it needs to be flush mount, sorry, so flush mount sign.
Okay, like, there was some byplay here, flat or,
Do you wanna bring David Bento up to talk a little bit about it? Sorry.
He knows.
Sorry.
Can I have a moment here? Eric, I don't know, I didn't listen for your vote. Did you get a vote?
I did, yes.
Okay, that's all I needed time. I didn't think to listen for you and look to see when you raised your right hand. Sorry, sir, come forward.
we kind of forgot you were there.
I think I accidentally raised my left hand.
Okay.
Uh-oh. That doesn't count.
It is a one-side, do I need to state my name? David Bento, Washington. It is a one-sided sign, and it's on a can that, the structure inside of it is made to be one-sided.
Yeah.
Now, it could be modified, but for the purpose of timing and all, it's a one-sided sign, so.
That's great.
Okay.
So
Although
you're-
structurally, when they did have it on the roof, probably of any of them that, is smaller, it's only a 6-foot sign. So as far as potentially having it on a roof, I'm not, of all of them, I think that one is somewhat appealing. And you brought up the relevance to the Dalles. There was a number of flying A signs in this town, so anyway, thanks.
So it's agreeable with you folks if it were down on, flat on the building, the Optimal Cigar building, in the alleyway.
It is with me.
Yeah, Main Street.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, because it's all just about making sure it's well located, well placed for safety, and getting people walking around the
town, so yeah.
We kind of talked about either putting it on that front surface or the side. I guess we've been talking all the time about alleys and having it not be on the front of a building. So even though it would look nice, on the right-hand side of that far window, I think right in the alley, in that area, probably would be better because it fits the sort of little guideline we've sort of set up.
Yeah.
And because if we put it on the front, then somebody else later down the line come along and say, well, you said you didn't wanna do that, but you put the one on Sigmund's or on that building in the front. And I don't wanna set up a bad precedent.
What is your fault with having a roof mount on that one? Similar to our original drawing that I have here in front of me.
So let me show you here just to kind of give you.
There it is.
I personally like it on the side better visually, but that's just a matter of opinion.
I could not vote for it up there on the roof line. I think on the side, on the alley side, like we talked, I would have no problem with that.
So just to kind of give you a little, I know that there was some comments before last week, specifically about the Dawn Donuts and looking at the building line and making sure that something wasn't projecting above. And granted, yes, I did already state that these two buildings are definitely separate. However, looking at the height of Sigmund's building and compared to the Optima Cigar building, that could potentially, it would blend a little bit better. And I think that maybe where Doug was going on the height of it, being on the roof versus a flush mount. Or actually maybe it's Bob. Oh, sorry.
To me, that location you have there is probably as good as we could ever get. If we put it on the flat of the building, we don't see in this picture the narrowness of the alley and how you're gonna have to stay as close to the front of the building as you can, or else it won't be visible. And then it's only gonna be visible to the people that are traveling northbound on Court Street.
I guess I don't see a problem with that because it's gonna be towards the front edge.
And we've also been talking about foot traffic.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So.
I have no quorum, I'm not gonna stop on that. I'm gonna keep on moving because it's gonna get my dinner hour. I need an application, I need a motion.
Okay, I can do the same as that I did before and rewrite a condition of approval number 1, basically stating work will be completed and substantial. So I'm assuming you wanna do flush mount on the building is what you guys are looking to do? Which we didn't really get an option to photos, so let me work this here just a second.
Okay, at this point, I'm gonna close the public hearing, if we ever knew when it ended, and now we're deliberating with the commission.
Okay, so what, I could do a condition of approval number 1, work will be completed in substantial conformance to the revision of the Flying A sign to be attached to the alley side facade of the building. And then we could add number 6 at the bottom, again, stating installation of a small placard at eye level will be required for the neon sign. Details of the historic sign will include the vintage original location and short history of the sign.
Dave, are you thinking that because it doesn't have a back, that it's one-sided, that maybe that's better to be flush? Did it?
I would say yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
You wanna make a motion?
I make a motion that we, whatever Dawn was saying, that we put it in that corner on the alley, up high and towards the front.
Okay, so condition approval number 1 being modified and then adding number 6.
So I make that.
I second the motion.
Hearing no further discussion, do you have anything you wanna add to this, Eric? I keep kind of overlooking you.
Oh, no, that's fine. Nope, I don't have anything to add.
Well, then I'm gonna call for the question. All in favor, mark your right hand there. All in favor, say aye and raise your right
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Anybody that's opposed isn't here. So that takes care of application 169-119.
Correct.
All right, we're moving right along. Now, we're up to application 171-19, and this is on the, I gotta go on the Pease Department Store building, and I have to ask if there's any conflict of interest amongst the commission members?
None here.
None.
Okay, hearing none, we will go on from there to, I guess, the staff report.
Yes. So, in front of
Excuse
you.
me,
Oh,
did
sorry.
he reopen the public hearing? Does it reopen?
Oh, so this is a new one.
But was
Oh.
it officially reopened?
Oh, so that we're opening, no, this wasn't reopened, this is brand new, so this will be opening the public hearing.
Opening the public hearing, yes, on
And ask for the staff report.
71-19, I think.
Perfect. Okay, so in the packet that you have in front of you that Paula had set, there was a letter here, from a concerned citizen. We did not actually have the person's name, which basically, their letter in short stated, please do not pollute our downtown with neon signs. So it kind of went through, we already added modern art to our historic buildings, and they felt it was far from keeping the pride of historical The Dalles. The historic building preservation has done a great job putting new life and purposes to these buildings. Don't add new tacky neon signs to these beautiful buildings. So, it says we have a museum, use it for that purpose, please. So that was the letter that you did receive, that is a party of record. We also did receive, an email that I received from Travis Dillard, who is the owner of the Honnold building. And I can go ahead and pass these out to you. Travis, in a nutshell, I had emailed with concerns regarding the lighting on the building and, having tenants, obviously, he'll be filling those tenant spaces soon, and concerns regarding, shining into those residential units. I did respond to him in the email stating that he was ill. I didn't want him to come to the meeting, but, he stated he's perfectly fine with the classic signs downtown. That said, he believes that they need to be turned off past a certain time, which I believe that you had already addressed. If not, that'll make the second floor residential less desirable or devaluing his building, and so that'd be very unfortunate. So I'll provide you with copies of those. Okay, so the issue for this application is number 171-19. The Dalles Main Street is applying to install a classic neon sign to the facade adjacent to the alleyway behind the Edward C. Pease Department Store building, commonly known as Craig's Office Supply Building. The property is located at 323 East 2nd Street, is classified as a secondary resource in the Dalles Commercial Historic District. We did publish notification in the local newspaper as well as 2 property owners within 100 feet and the State Historic Preservation Office. To date, or when the staff report was written, we did not receive any comments. The 2 comments I have provided you copies with. Craig building was built circa 1910 and was restored in 2016 and is considered a classical commercial architecture. The building is currently used for commercial and medical building offices. So again, Main Street's working in coordination with the National Sign Museum to install these classic neon signs in semi-obscure locations. So here's the property. The applicant's property is here, the application property is here. And then the one comment that we did receive was from the Honnold building, which is adjacent to our catty corner. So staff, I'm not gonna go ahead and go through, you guys can read the comments. So the so conditions of approval, staff is recommending approval with 4 conditions, which would be work will be completed in substantial conformance to the pictures and proposals as submitted and reviewed. Number 2, installation of the classic sign and plaque shall not shall not alter the essential form and integrity of the historic building. Utmost care will be taken in the installation. Number 3, the applicants will need to submit plans for structural building and electrical permits to the Wasco County Building Codes Department. Number 4, the applicants are required to notify the planning department of any alteration of the approved plans. And then I would also suggest to add number 5 to read as the other applications, which would be installation of a small placard at eye level will be required for the neon sign. Details of the historic sign will include the vintage, original location, and short history of the sign. Do you have any questions of staff?
Don, they were concerned about light in these windows that if they were trying to rent.
Well, actually, it wasn't, I did not get a picture of, so, the Honnold building is right here, so on the main.
Oh, was it across the street?
Correct, yeah, so across the street, so and where this is going to be, it's gonna be semi-obscured back in this location. So, the owner, Travis Dillard, had just requested that there be a limitation in terms of when that would be lit up, so that it wouldn't cause any type of, light pollution to his, residential units here.
Well, that could be one of those that you stipulate, they have to be off, you can put a timer on it and turn it off at a certain time before it was considered a problem. Cause you're gonna get light from the street lights, and I don't know how bright that one would be, but it doesn't look like it's a real bright one. The way the picture is done, that sign is not parallel with the side of the building. Would it be installed at an angle? It looks like it's at a 45-degree angle almost.
So, and I think that's, when we're dealing with, non-3D, printed photos, and I think we can go and let Mr. Bento kind of give a little bit more, or Main Street give some comments on how that would actually be installed to the building. Down here you can kind of see, I think that it would be flush, but, I probably should let them answer that question, because I'm not 100% sure.
No, it's two-sided. It's
Two-sided,
two-sided
okay.
sign. So it's
Okay.
two-sided
So-
sign, so one question.
So let's, yeah.
But would it sit parallel, say that that's the side of the building, would it be parallel with the side, or would it be at an angle?
I believe, we're this way or that way?
So I think
It's
towards
the end of the. Okay.
into Jefferson.
So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
comes
yeah,
from-
yeah.
It would, okay, so you're saying it would stay up this way?
Correct.
Okay.
So it's a two-sided sign that would be visible from the Honnold building and the freeway, is
Yes.
that
So
what?
right, so
Yes.
right here, so we'll be projecting from this location right here.
But is it parallel with the front of the building, this
No.
way,
No,
or is
it's
it an angle?
Perpendicular, so it would be
No,
projecting from this.
Parallel with it?
So perpendicular,
No,
so
it'd be
Doug, it'd be,
perpendicular, it would stick out this way.
yeah,
Stick out.
so it'd be like a blade
So it'd be-
coming out of the building.
It's a blade sign, so it'll stick out from the side of the building.
Is
Over the
it
sidewalk.
like a 45-degree angle, or is it like this? Is it like this?
90
or-
degree, straight out into the road.
Yeah.
Straight out towards the road.
Parallel with the back of the building.
Yes, parallel with the back of the road.
So it's this way?
Yes.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But would it be in front then of the face of the building? Or would it be sitting back so that, cause we've been talking about the alley thing?
It'll
Would
be,
it, if you were going along the side of the building, would you be able to see it in front of you?
yeah,
You would be able to.
but you'll also be able to see it from the alley as well. That whole lower portion of the roof is only one story, it's going to be basically above that. So it'll be visible from the back of the building, it'll be visible from the alley, it'll be visible from Federal Street as well.
I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying yet.
Someone draw a picture, please.
This building is very tall.
Right, and it's gonna go where you're pointing.
And it's going to be up here, and it's going to be
Yes.
extending out over Federal, but this is also visible from all of the parking area behind here,
Okay.
visible from.
I guess what
freeway
I'm
behind
wondering,
here.
is that a problem with what we were talking about being in the alley? I know it's on the alley side.
Well, this is not the front of the building by any stretch, it's the back of the building.
No,
Here's
it's
the front of
side.
the building.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Could be on the corner. This would be the corner.
I guess that's not a conflict.
No, I don't see it as being a problem.
It seems like people are more concerned with Second and Third Street, right?
Yeah. And it's not gonna eliminate clear across.
And-
I don't
and-
see that as a problem.
And if I could address simply the Huddle building across, cause I've been all over the Huddle building, as
Yeah.
well as all over this building, cause because I'm one of the owners of this building. This will not be very visible from the Huddle building, and it will be visible out of the front of the Huddle building. But it's quite a ways back
Yes.
from the street.
Yeah.
Half a
And
block
literally,
across.
the Huddle building there used to be Tony's Menswear was right here with a neon sign sticking out the front of Tony's Menswear. That would have been very visible. This is quite a ways behind, and quite far off of the street for any concern from Huddle. So, and with a timer, I just don't see that would be much of a conflict.
Thank you.
So I do think that the timer and what had been discussed with the other applications is exactly what the building owner was looking for. So a little bit of protection there.
Where are we? I've lost track of where I was. We're still in a public hearing.
We are still in public hearing.
You have any more questions that you'd like to ask the proponents?
No, it's just different than the others, which are in alleyways, and, so it's, more visible from the side, but it's a whole block, or half a block back from Second Street. Pardon me. I have a question that has nothing to do with placement. I wanna know what Jefferson Hall is.
Now we're covered.
Is this a gentleman's club, or what is it?
Uh-oh, who's laughing?
Jefferson Hall was in Milwaukee. Oh,
Come on, I'm sorry.
Please identify yourself too. I don't know how you're keeping up, Paula.
David Bento. Jefferson Hall was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right downtown, and it was in a German area, so it was a German club for a long period of time. I have the whole history written down off the top of my head, and not quite so fresh as it once was, but I know a historian from Milwaukee. And it went from being a German, club to then later became a Polish club, and then into the 1960s and 70s when a lot of the counterculture started adapting and restoring old clubs. It actually became a music club where Ike and Tina Turner performed at, and the Grateful Dead, and a bunch of different bands kind of through the 60s and 70s. So got Milwaukee history, and I do have a number of signs from Milwaukee.
No, I was just curious.
Yes, so it would be more interesting if you were to
No,
we can make it anything you want it to be. Erase that from the record, it can be anything you want it to be.
Well, see, we have a local lady who is very involved in the history of the ladies of negotiable affections. We wanted to be really sure that
anything you like.
I have a particular worry here, and maybe I'm sounding a little old-fuddy, but this one here is contradictory to our historic register. When we put up something as big as that, sticking on the building, they're no longer gonna refer to the building as P's Department Store. They're gonna call it Jefferson Hall, because we named it when we put the new neon sign up. Are we taking something from our historic history?
There's nothing to
I
prevent.
don't think so.
There's nothing to prevent the owner from naming that second story Jefferson Hall. It is an attractive up on the second floor. What was it, a department store at one time?
yeah, P's and May's department
P's
store.
and May's department store.
Yes.
Right.
And it's being, the Craig building, only because Craig office supply was there.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
frankly, it has no identity other than the fact
So
that
it
it's
could
a
be
second
Jefferson
federal.
Hall.
And now it's known as the MCMC building, simply because they occupy good reason. So giving it some identity, we actually think it adds value to the building. Putting a really cool Jefferson Hall neon sign on there, and if people start calling it Jefferson Hall building, it really does not bother us. Jim Craig doesn't care, I don't care, I think it's a wonderful addition, so.
Eric?
And if it wants to be ladies of the evening or whatever.
Then we can lease it to Leblanc.
I'd like to hear Eric's opinion on this.
Oh geez, well, it is kind of a big sign, at least in the pictures that I saw. And it might be a little overwhelming, but you know, I don't know. It is kind of on the back side, so maybe on that signage that kind of explains the sign, we need to say what the historic name of the building is, just so that people don't get confused.
Agreed.
Okay.
Well, it's a restricted, pretty well restricted building now to the public. It's an office building and they have no reason to let the public in. And I just see people on walking tours saying, how do I get into Jefferson Hall? And that's what I'm
Well, you
referring
have to pay your initiation fee.
Yes.
So, Gary, I just have a question for you. Do you have a historic placard on the front of the building that gives the Edward Pease? You do not, okay,
No,
so maybe.
no, but we certainly could.
Okay, so maybe that's something, I know that Eric especially has brought up to me a couple times, about trying to get some funding for that. I don't necessarily have funding for this year, but maybe that's something that I can look to city council to get some, maybe 3 or 4 plaques a year, so we can make sure that some of these buildings, or as many that want to be signed, and we have our local history on those placards.
You're talking about something like Carolyn was discussing.
Well, no, so like our historic shields, so the ones that we have, the larger historic plaques.
Yeah.
The one Carolyn has, she had shared with you a few years ago, and I actually was just looking at those photos the other day, I should have brought them, which were a little bit more square, and it was kind of like reminded me of like when you have a multiple tenants in a building where it's like a directory, but they actually have the years that the uses were there, which I think would be really cool for the Dalles, but.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures that she brought back, and that's really interesting, because like this building, it has been a number of different things over the years.
And that I think that's just as important too, and then that obviously would then show that there was no connection to Jefferson Hall, that was just a art installation.
Yeah.
Well, if just, we're sending people on a walking tour, and they're gonna have some kind of a conveyance to tell them where they are, and is it gonna coincide with, oh, here I am, oh, this is Jefferson Hall, well, where's Jefferson Hall on my walking tour? That's what I'm saying.
Right, and it won't, and what it will say on that walking store, that app will say that this is the Edward C. Pease department store. But what David and I have talked about on the side is that looking at, and I shared with you, a morphing of your app that we're just getting live soon to have different components, so that you could have a national sign or a neon sign museum walking tour, so that once they get more of these placed in our community, that you walk up to a building, it'll pop up saying you're at this historic building, and then it will also, hey, there's a neon sign here, and do you wanna read the history about it? So that's gonna kinda couple.
If there's no further questions of staff and the proponents, I will run this gavel again and close the public hearing, and we will deliver. Alright, the public hearing is closed. I've lost track of my number, but I'll find one. Application 171, I think.
171-19.
And, that's 19, so now we're deliberating as a commission. Eric, have you got anything to open this up with?
No.
That's pretty easy. Doug?
No, I would make a motion that we okay this, or
So So we have.
Don has specific.
So we have the 4 conditions of
Wordage.
approval. I suggested that we add the 5th condition, which was the installation of the small placard. But one thing just kind of brought up to my mind, I know that we had talked with, but we didn't put a condition of approval regarding the time and making sure that they aren't illuminating past hours. I don't know if that's something that, I mean, I guess I can trust that they aren't going to do that, but if you feel that it's necessary, we could potentially add that as a condition of approval, stating that, they be put on a timer and not be extended beyond a certain hour. Or if we wanna just go ahead and let them work with staff, that can also happen, and I can work with them directly.
Something about time could be negotiated. I don't know what your wordage could be, but.
So we'll look at adding 5, which will be the installation of the placard, and then number 6. So we do have, light ordinances in our general ordinance or our land use ordinance that talks about lights projecting. However, it's like a foot candle at a property line, where signs are a little bit different. Obviously, we don't allow lit signs in residential areas, and that's usually what we're protecting. We kind of have a mixed use downtown, so maybe we can just put something that states, limitations on illumination, or excuse me, limitations on hours of illumination, will be
limited time for operation. Or capability. Meaning you put the timer on and if you.
I really think we're only talking about time in the PM, we're not
Right,
time in
correct.
review. So you'd
Okay,
have
how about-
time
how
off
about-
at 11 PM.
How about number 6, saying evening hour illumination will be limited to, you can just say city ordinances. And I'm not sure how to really write that. Evening hour illumination will be limited. Maybe we can just do that, and then that'd be something that would allow me to work with the applicant. I don't know if you guys are comfortable with that. Evening hour illumination will be limited. Just stay limited, or do you want more specific? Do we have- Okay, so we got 1 through 4, adding number 5, which would be the small placard, and then adding number 6, which would state evening hour illumination would be limited.
And item number 5 is?
Item number 5 would be the installation of the small placard at eye level, so I did not put that on each one, which it's kind of addressed in number 2, but I just wanna outline it a little bit more, so we can make sure it's there. So the 4 existing conditions of approval, number 5 would be the small placard at eye level, and then number 6 would be evening hour illumination limitations.
And we have the motion on the floor?
Yes, we
Yeah, I made a motion that
I
we-
second the motion.
Which you said.
with the 6 conditions.
With the added conditions,
Yes.
But, yeah.
Discussion.
Any further discussion, Tim?
Any place that Jerry Garcia or Ike and Tina Turner performed under a sign, it's good enough for the Dalles. All right, I'm in favor of this, by the way. I'm a non-voting member, but I think the sign looks wonderful and it will add greatly to that building.
Alright, I'm gonna call for the vote, Eric. All in favor, say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
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 There. Anyone opposed is not here. So, that will close out the resolution, not the resolution, but the application. Or do we have more applications, Don?
We don't,
No.
but we do have some more stuff to do. We've gotta get.
Well,
the
I
resolutions.
realize that, we got a lot more to do, but we don't need to have and we appreciate it. We don't want you to leave unless you just really have to, but we're gonna be deliberating about other things and discussing them, so
So
I
Dave-
wanted to know that we probably can't back up.
I do actually.
Thank you for all of your input.
Yeah,
We
thank
really
you.
appreciate that.
So David, I don't know how public, the conversation that we had last week regarding the, project that you're looking at doing, I don't know if, do you wanna share any of that with them, or do you wanna wait? Do you wanna wait? Okay, we can talk later, I definitely wanna bring them in, because I think you're gonna have some really good support for, we're gonna get this, so.
Okay.
Tim's hungry.
Tim's hungry, okay.
No, I
Great.
came in
We got
early.
resolutions. Thank you, gentlemen,
I
very much.
came in early last week because, or tonight, to make up for the lateness. But now, there's a dance recital that I've gotta run to,
Yes,
so
can't miss that.
I'm sorry.
That's
What are we
all right.
gonna do without your wisdom?
I don't, carry on.
Alright, alright, we'll let it go at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
That will give me whatever you want.
You've been just read.
Okay, Bob, let's move to the resolutions.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks, Tim.
Yes.
So do we have to vote on these resolutions?
Yes, we do.
no, that's right, that's why, we don't wanna become.
Well, I didn't finish my question.
Pardon, what is it?
Do we vote on them separately?
Yes.
So, yes, typically, yes, I mean, I guess we've never really thought about that, but I wonder why, okay, we want all of them.
I haven't even looked, and it probably would be wiser, Paula can look for it, but how many, on the first application, how many, what do I wanna call
Conditions of approval?
them? Conditions, there, I knew I'd get
So on the first
one that was four,
on the first two applications,
there's four.
or excuse me, so on the first application, there's 6. So
Yeah.
there was
On
4.
the last one, there's 6, but the first two only have 4.
Actually, correct, 4, but we modified number 1 and we added 2 more, so there's actually a total of 6 conditions of approval on the,
All three of
last
them.
stop building, correct.
Okay, that was my question before we went any further. Okay, I'm looking for a motion to pass resolution 158 past 19 with 6 conditions of approval.
I move that we accept resolution 158-19, with 6 conditions of approval.
I second the motion.
There is no further discussion, we'll say, all in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 I think we came through, Eric. Did we lose Eric?
No, he
No,
said
he
no.
said aye.
No, he said aye.
Okay, sorry, Eric, I'm not listening right enough. Alright,
Okay, so the second, the Optimo Cigar building actually has 5 conditions of approval.
oh,
So we had 4, we modified number 1, and then we added the 5th condition.
okay. Alright, I'll make this one. I make a motion that we pass resolution 159-19 with 5 conditions of approval.
I second the motion.
No discussion, we will vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hey, you're right on there this time. Alright, now we're up to resolution 160-19.
And that has 6 conditions of approval.
I move that we accept resolution 16019 with 6 conditions.
I second the motion.
Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
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 Thank you, Eric. I'm listening for you now. I keep looking for you, but I can't see you. Now, that takes care of our legal fees.
Does.
Yeah, staff, do you have something that,
So I don't really have any comments other than thank you. I know, it was a lot of discussion, and I think there was some great discussion today. And I spoke with each one of you.
Great.
Just getting, especially getting the history, I think helped you all a little bit more too, to kind of understand the whole thought process, and to I mean, I know David's pretty humble about it, but this was kind of one of his ideas that he'd worked with Matthew Cleaves when Matthew was the executive director, so this goes way back, and, you know, it was kind of his vision, so I'm glad that he was here to actually speak today. I did, also, so thank you, definitely thank you that was some great conversation, and I think there was quite a bit that was brought up. I do want some direction from you, if you would like me to just work with the Main Street to do a master plan, or if you would like me to suggest or talk to them about bringing a master plan, that they work with David and the Sign Museum and see what they could do, or kind of get an idea of what buildings would be earmarked for a potential future sign.
And I was, quite impressed with, Tim's list.
Mm-hmm.
And so how that gets woven into, so that we don't have to argue about alleys every time or what have, just that there are some givens.
Good
I guess.
guidelines.
Yeah, and that would certainly speed up this process.
Okay, so what I will do is I will talk to them about that, give them obviously the 3 examples that were approved today. We will probably be seeing the Dawn Donuts probably back in the next month to review that on the other building, and then I'll ask them to possibly look at some guidelines as well as a master plan to present just as a discussion item, just to kind of get an idea. So I'll work with them on that. And then the only other last thing that I do have, the historic walking tour that we are, it's going live. It's actually, I think she's working on it right now, or that it is live. I just haven't downloaded the app. I did talk to Sandy a little bit today about the methodology that was provided with the walking tour. There was a little bit of confusion in terms of, there were a couple different walking tours that I had information that I turned in for the grant that was different than what the Chamber's walking tour was. And then the Chamber made some modifications to theirs. And then I also found somebody back in the 90s, somebody at the Dallas High School had actually done a walking tour. And so what we ended up doing, Paula, she loved me for this, but we put together all of the 3 of those tours and kind of took a look at them individually to see how we could include, make sure we didn't exclude, and that we did include those important properties. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a copy of that list. So you'll see what's on our historic tour.
This is Eric. I think I have to go now.
Oh, okay.
So.
Well, thank you, Eric.
Okay, thank you guys.
Eric?
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I'll I'll email you the list from
Okay,
today.
thanks so much.
So,
Right.
so with
Bye-bye.
with this historic walking tour, I don't know if any of you are familiar with, is it Thursday night? The Art Museum or the Art Center will be having a sense of place meeting and an unveiling of a future mural that'll be going on in the old Tumulum building, which is now housed by the Dallas Chronicle. So what they're doing is, and I think I mentioned this last week, it's a mashup of historic photos and of all these properties that have some nostalgia or a sense of place for what does it mean to be the Dalles. So working with the executive director, Scott Stevenson, I gave him our walking tour list, and he had all of the properties on our walking tour included in that mashup, as well as a couple other places like Spookies, and I think Big Jim's was also on that list, that just really screamed the Dalles. And what we're looking at doing is getting another ping on that property when they put that mural up. It'll actually be hand painted by a local artist and be attached to the Dallas Chronicle building, formerly the Tumulum building, and it'll have all of this mashup on it. But we want to put a ping there that actually gives information about this being a historic walking tour. So if somebody gets there and they have that app, it'll say all of the properties that are in the historic walking tour #1 are on this mashup on this building.
So I got a postcard from the Art Center yesterday. So that is a piece of that installation?
Yes.
Okay.
And they did have a little, I know, you're like, what is that?
What is this?
No,
It's really, it's an odd, it is a really, you think about it, to me, it kind of reminds me of, you know, kids doing the hodgepodge back in the day and, you know, just taking and doing their, but the way that it's designed, and this artist, she actually does them more, vertical. And so I was kind of interested to see how she was going to put that on a horizontal building and make it more linear. And looking at it, I was so impressed, and granted, the middle of it, what do you think is the middle?
It was really interesting, and I, of course, you know, first thing I did was look for the courthouse. It's not in that piece, but anyway, it was just kind of amazing the way it all
Pieced together.
fit together.
So right at the top, they had to do some changes, but because it looked a little bit too bulky on the top of it, actually has a real peak, and then it comes out. So St. Peter's Landmark is basically the top of this pile of photos, and then they're all just.
I had to laugh because, I pitched an idea to the Dalles Art Center a long time ago about doing a display of historic buildings, and was told that that wouldn't be of interest to anybody.
So the new director, I don't know if you've had a chance to meet the new director, he knows his art, he has some energy that I think is going to be great for this community. I hope that he definitely stays here and that we're able to keep him here. I also received, he had met with Randy Twidwell at the radio station, and they talked about the meeting for Thursday. And I actually received a phone call from Randy, and all the years that I've worked here, Randy, you know, we talk about some of the projects, but he called and left me the most amazing message about how important and how this really showcases the Dalles, and that he is so impressed with this mural and what they've done, just because he got to see the actual, the full so I'm really excited. The artist, is pretty well known,
well, you're doing fine, you're just getting the food, that's all.
Yeah, anyway, so I'm pretty excited about this, because it has all these buildings that you all have been protecting, you know, helping restore and helping guide at least, nice restorations too. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for, some previous discussions and conversations that, you know, sometimes it's hard putting up. And, you know, and these fellows have had a lot more experience than I have, but it's,
There was some tough decisions, and I was very honest with each one of you that I was honest with the applicant. And when they came in, I'm like, this isn't gonna happen. When they showed the roof, they were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh, I probably need to not say that. I'm like, you can apply for this, but I'm not sure I can support it. So when they originally came in, I was honest, I said, I'm not sure that staff can support this application. And I had I told you, a lot of conversations with myself and thinking about it and looking at it, and luckily I was raised in a very open-minded look at things and look for obscurities and look for beauty in everything. And I'm actually happy the direction that we did go, and every conversation and every comment that you made, I'm gonna let you know, Paula and I had numerous conversations after that meeting, just over the last week, about, you know, we also have concerns, and they are very valid and in everything that you guys all said, the two of us, we both agree, everybody, so, you guys do have a tough job. I mean, I just am trying to facilitate and make sure that we make the right decision.
Good. I am only concerned because I sat here, I don't know, I got the gavel over there someplace. Have we in any way violated the ordinance?
In terms of the approvals?
Yes. Now, what we have just done here this afternoon, is there anybody that's liable to come back and said that you have not followed the ordinance that you're operating in? No. Our historic landmark.
So the Secretary of Interior.
Do you have one?
So, I mean, you could always have somebody make that claim, and you could always have somebody come back and state that we did not follow.
Paula, would you make sure that Sandy gets a copy of this, and maybe you want one, Doug?
Yeah, I probably should. I maybe have one in my packet, but I think as long as we consider it artwork,
Right, and that was where I'd actually, and then Eric, and luckily, I mean, and I was glad, Eric and I were not ever able to discuss this, so I was glad to hear Eric's take on, what this actually means. We do have, if you looked at any one of the staff reports in finding number 3, it talks about adding, conjectural or features that are not part of a historic, it's providing a false sense of history. So that, I mean, if there was a reason for you to deny this application, it could have potentially been that finding, making a statement that you felt that it provided conjectural or a false sense of history. So that there are, I mean, that's kind of one of those interpretation things. However, Eric's comment about them being temporary and the way they're being installed, and that they're actually looking at an art installation versus it being a sign or something that's going to be permanently on that building. I think that when he said that, I thought, okay, we're doing the right thing. So I think I think you're fine. I mean, anybody can come back. Parties of record typically are the ones that could appeal a decision, so it would be the people that were in here or Mr. Dillard, who did provide written comments.
Well, the little note we found on our desk today says that there is opposition out there, to what we're doing. And I'm not afraid of opposition. I've always had opposition, facing me looking one way or another, but I just wondered that, like I said, spent a lot of time reading that ordinance, and I just seen where we was actually going somewhere else other than where the ordinance was
Well, I
pointing.
mean, one could say that about any mural or any new sign that we put on a building, because those signs, those current signs, were not historic to that building. I mean, you could kind of look at it just about any way. An awning that, was built there before, and you put a cloth awning up where it was metal before, is that creating a false sense? I think the big thing is to ensure that the alteration and modification that you're putting to the building isn't so permanent, or if it is permanent, that it follows every single guideline. If it's something less permanent or a temporary installation, then you have a little more leeway as long as it doesn't destroy or damage the building.
Well, something that Bob, or what Bob brought up makes me think of something else. We, what the caveat that, allows us to do this is that it's a temporary, art installation. And so, sometimes people just get used to things, and so 5 years from now, somebody has to have a tickler that says this needs to be renewed.
Yeah.
And
they come back and request again, or
and so,
that time.
And maybe 5 years from now, we have neon signs all over the place. I love those pictures of 2nd Street with all the neon signs.
There's a lot of signs.
And, what I wanted to say was, the issue, the light issue concerning this one, to make it authentic, it needs to blend.
Flash, right, or do the Bates Hotel kind of, fade in and out. So I think it's going to be self-limiting. I don't think we're going to have an influx, and I think, to put something gaudy in our downtown that is attached to the sign museum, I think David will be very conscientious of that.
Yeah.
And trying to make sure that it isn't like, oh my gosh, look at, he's got this left everywhere. He does have a super cool Jansen girl that's about 10 or 12 feet in length, maybe 20, I think about 20. I wanted to put it over by the swimming pool, and he just looked at me like, he's like, oh my gosh, can you imagine that on top of our swimming pool for a short-term installation? That would have some nexus there, anyway. So there's a lot. I mean, I think what the decision that you made and then adding the conditions, absolutely, I think you did a great job, so thank you for that.
Now, if I overheard this, I mean, I don't hear half of it anyhow, are we going to be called to approve the new mural? Or is that outside our historic district?
It is not on a historic building. Although you could probably state that it is because it's over 50 years old. It's an old CMU building. It's the Tumblelum building. It's nothing super fancy. It looks great. The Chronicle has fixed it up, and it's got a nice palette there, a nice long one. I think there was a historic or a mural on it at one time that was removed. I think it was one of the typical ones that we have in the Dallas area.
Have you talked to has Mr. Gomez talked to you about, painting on the backside of this building?
So they did a couple of years ago when Main Street was looking at that, and that was when Jeremiah Paulson was the director of Main Street. And we talked about, location and what made more sense. I'm not sure if it's bare brick on the back, and if it is, then we would discourage. I'm not sure if he made it sound like.
What I was thinking of when he was, talking about that was the murals on the east end of town that were done right on the raw brick. And then there was, an article about one of those in the, Chronicle, and the lady, whoever it was talking about this incredible number of gallons of paint that they needed, cause it kept sucking in.
Oh.
And I thought, well, that's a mural that's never gonna go away.
Brick, I mean, I think that some of those ghost murals that we do see in town, obviously there was lead back then in the paint, so it stayed a little while, but I think because bricks are porous and they breathe, that you end up with that, and that is again another reason why our historic guidelines say, if you're a primary building, which means prior to 1900, and it's still brick, they don't want you to paint brick, because it actually kind of ruins the building.
Yeah.
So, we kind of
That's
encourage,
what I was talking.
And Eric had mentioned, Eric was very adamant, we had some murals years ago that were requested on some buildings, and Eric's like, no, we can't do this, so we kind of changed it up a little bit.
Can we go home?
I, have nothing more to add. Do you have anything?
I'm good. We had a good meeting.
Good meeting, you guys.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
The thing is that there's not a real good understanding where our historic district is in the city of the Dells. It does not cover the whole district, as the man stated tonight.
Right, it does not, right.
Ends right there, pretty close to the Commodore. I mean, not the Commodore, but the old Chronicle building. And the old Chronicle building, my understanding of the west face of that building is in the historic district, but when you get down a little ways in the middle of that block, it ends.
We've got one more block, so where Stone Ski and Sport used to be, where Mid-Columbia Housing is, that is kind of where it stops for our commercial historic district. We do have a couple individually inventoried properties that are just past that, including the Sunshine Mill is also inventoried, but it is not in a national district, so. And maybe we do look at that.
How hard would it be to amend that?
So this is where so Sally Donovan, who did our first ones, has since passed, and over the years, we've talked about doing an expansion of the historic district. It's, you almost have to have a pretty much a 100% buy-in. I think you can get away with not having 100% buy-in, but she said that she would not suggest any expansion unless you had all of those property owners willing to become do an expansion. She'd also suggested that it may actually be easier for us as the Historic Landmark Commission to look at maybe a different district. Maybe we concentrate on the residential district and do a separate one up on 4th Street. It's kind of like we've got commercial historic district, Trevitt's that way, and then we come up with a 4th Street residential. She'd also suggested that we take a look up by the high school where we have the cool Sufert House and all of that really nice row of old houses in the Dalles, and we've got some amazing.
But we still gotta get the property owners to buy in.
We gotta get them to buy in, so sometimes that's the difficult part.
Yeah, that's what I was,
But what percentage on the residential? All
I think,
110?
well, and that, I think maybe, and I'd have to take a look, I think Sally's recommendation was everybody. They did have to do some legislation a few years ago that required, so if you bought a piece of property and it was, you were unaware or somebody else had put it, you have to get the owners, I think it is 100% now, actually, they just changed that a couple of years ago. So in order for us to landmark somebody, and put these additional requirements on it, they have to say yes, the current owner has to say yes.
I won't keep this group here any longer, cause I gotta go to the restroom as well as everyone else, it seems like, so let's go home. But I do wanna talk to you, Dawn, maybe tomorrow, next day.
I'm here. Come see me, thank you guys, thanks.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and I'm always available, so please don't hesitate to come.
except when you're at lunch.
Well, I know, or Bob will tell you I'm not there, so.